Everybody in line can sign in and grab your handouts, but we'll get started. We are recording this. That's why I have this mic on. Sterling Heights is muted so that the recording doesn't include their feedback or background noise. So I'm going to try to remember, if you ask questions, to repeat them. We do have the room mics off so that it's not picking up background noise as well. Probably will stay this part of the room or back just for the recording purposes. But we are here today to do harassment and diversity training. Thank you for your mandated attendance. Debbie and I are leading this for the Michigan offices, and we have some colleagues throughout the rest of our offices that are delivering this training as well. We're going to start with the harassment training. The diversity training is a little more interactive, so we'll kind of get this one out of the way. This is scheduled to go to 11:30. I don't know if we'll go all the way to 11:30, but I promise we will not go beyond that. So talking about harassment, what's the definition of harassment? Does anybody know? I'll give it to you. How about that? This is the act or an instance of harassing or disturbing, pestering, or troubling repeatedly. Okay, so we'll get to some further definitions, but we'll talk about patterns and consistency of some things that can be bothersome to folks. So what is harassment? It can involve a lot of different things, right? Obviously with the media right now, sexual harassment is big with the Me Too movement. But you can be harassed for a variety of things outside of your sexual gender, sexual orientation, your age, all types of things. Harassment can apply to that. Things that we've dealt with specifically at UHY that can be considered harassing behavior that people don't always think of. If maybe your wallpaper on your computer is inappropriate, but you think it's super cool, something that you believe in, something that you enjoy looking at, the next person that walks by your computer can find that offensive. And if that stays up, once it's been addressed with you, that can be considered harassing another employee. Printing something inappropriate and leaving it on the printer. If you're printing something inappropriate at work, just stop. Okay? Get a screen grab of that and send it to your phone, whatever you need to do with it. But it's happened. So be mindful of that. Telling inappropriate jokes. We're probably all a little bit guilty of saying something sarcastic, saying something that we think is funny. We think the person standing next to us is a friend of ours, even though they're our colleague. And sometimes we can get really comfortable with folks. Be mindful. You may feel comfortable with them. They may not have that same level of comfort with you. And they may be smiling and laughing because they're uncomfortable, but they may walk away and think, man, that was really uncomfortable for me to be a part of. Be aware of it. So sexual harassment. Again, with the Me Too movement, this is huge, right? Organizations are revisiting their harassment policies and giving more education as this has become pretty popular this year. Sexual harassment, there's a difference between harassment and discrimination, okay? So if you're the only female in a meeting and somebody says, hey, Amy, can you grab coffee for the group? That's discrimination over harassment, assuming that the female in the room is the one that will provide refreshments for everybody. Would I react over the top about it? Probably not. With somebody else? Possibly. And so you need to be mindful of those things. Sometimes we do them without thinking. If it becomes a pattern that you're doing that can become a harassment situation versus discrimination. So who can experience sexual harassment? A lot has changed throughout the years when it comes to sexual harassment. We always thought of women in the workplace. They were the victims of this. This is becoming, everybody in the workplace is unfortunately subjected to this or can be subjected to this. So it could be a woman harassing a man. It could be a man harassing a man. It can go always. So it's not just women being harassed. And even if a man hears another man harassing a woman, that can be harassment towards him. So you need to be super mindful of things that you're saying and doing in the office. So there's two types of harassment. Who knows what quid pro quo means?
For me, I'll do it for you.
That's right, something for something, essentially. So a lot of the harassment that occurs can come from somebody with power, and they say, you know what, if you do this, then I'll do this for you. I'll make sure you're promoted next year. I'll make sure you get a better bonus. So that's an example of quid pro quo. Hostile work environment is, again, the one that we really need to be conscious of. You can create a hostile work environment, not even realize it. I've had people come to me with complaints, and I'm sure the person that said what they said in front of them had no idea what they were saying is offensive or that it was even overheard by this person. But that's why we need to be responsible professionals in the workplace, at our clients, outside when we're wearing a UHY polo. Always need to be aware of your surroundings and what you're saying. So again, quid pro quo, something for something, usually occurs with a supervisor down to a subordinate, but that can work another way. Maybe the subordinate is aware of something about their superior and says, hey, if you do this, nobody has to know. So it can happen the other way around too. It's usually a supervisor to subordinate, but it can happen at an upward level as well. So hostile work environment, again, emailing jokes, texting jokes, maybe you're Facebook friends with somebody at work. I'm not a huge advocate of that because you might post something that you think is really funny or about politics, and now this person has seen it, and if it becomes a pattern of behavior that they're uncomfortable with, that can cause some issues in your work environment. So, hostile work environment. Somebody comes to HR with complaints, and they do, probably more than you think. We start asking questions like, how often does this happen? Did you just hear this one-off remark? Or is this a pattern that you're seeing with this individual? How severe is the conduct? Things can be very minor, your wallpaper on the computer, for example, as long as it's not too inappropriate. Or it can just be outright inappropriate. You make a gay joke that's really offensive, and you've crossed the line. Physically threatening, humiliating, considered bullying. We start getting the investigation going pretty quickly when we're getting to that level of hostile work environment. And does it unreasonably interfere with your work performance? If people are afraid to show up for work because they're afraid somebody's going to come up behind them and rub their shoulders for the 8th time, that's when we start running into problems. And again, people think nothing of certain behaviors, but you might have somebody not wanting to come into work because of something that you do as a regular part of your routine may make them uncomfortable. So what happens if things like this are happening and you don't say something? Obviously, the employee is going to be frustrated. The employee, and we all know this, right? The employee is telling their coworker this is going on, right? And that coworker is like, hey, she didn't want me to say anything, but so-and-so said this to her. And pretty soon, it's wildfire. Eventually, it gets to HR. But if you do nothing, it starts causing this unnecessary uncomfortableness throughout the entire office because things like that just spread quickly. So if we do nothing, it becomes uncomfortable. The person experiencing the harassment may quit. The victim may quit. Somebody might post something on Glassdoor. Somebody that was going to come in and work for us doesn't do so anymore because that behavior is something that's possibly tolerated. So lots of repercussions if we don't do anything at all. So again, what isn't sexual harassment? The stray remark, overly sensitive employees, consensual relationships, right? If we have plenty of people that date in the firm, also not preferred, but it happens. We understand that. You guys spend a lot of time with each other. Inevitably, we have relationships develop at the firm. If it gets to the point where people are moving in together, getting engaged, HR will provide you a document releasing the firm of any responsibility should that relationship deteriorate, that you can't hold us accountable for any misconduct that should occur moving forward. Let HR be the judge of what is harassment. You know, the stray remark to you may be the stray remark that that person says to everybody. So let us be the judge of that. You can come to us, we'll handle it tactfully. We may say, you know what, I'm glad you brought that to our attention. I don't think we need to do anything about that right now. I want you to keep me posted if something like that happens again. But you know, I think we're okay in that situation. But if it is something that we feel like needs investigation, then we'll do that. So again, if you do bring it to us, expect the questions as part of our investigation. Who, what, where, when, and the names. People inevitably come to me and say, I'm not going to tell you who said this, but, you know, and then I look like a jerk when it happens to you again because I didn't do anything. You need to tell me who's doing this behavior. I'm not running to that behavior for that person and say, you know, Jenny told me something, you know, and I'm not ratting anybody out. We're gonna handle it with tact, but you need to tell us who, because if you come to us with that and say, I don't want to tell you who did that, there's nothing that can be done. That's going to create frustration all over the board. So we'll ask those questions. We'll do an internal investigation. We'll document everything, and then we will supply the person that made the complaint with a resolution statement. It won't always say the direct action taken on the person they made the complaint about because their confidentiality is protected as well. But it will say we've conducted this investigation. If there's any action items that we need to do, it will capture that. And they will receive a thorough letter from the investigator or the attorney if it's warranted if we bring in counsel. So general guidelines and principles, you can read through those. Any questions on the first part of the harassment? Don't worry, we still have a whole nother presentation to get through. But any questions on that portion of the presentation? Pretty good? Okay, I'm going to put up the other presentation. Okay, did everybody get a handout? All right. All right. You don't need it just yet, but just checking. So some of you may remember a couple years ago we did diversity and sensitivity training, and we brought somebody from the outside in to handle that training for us. Since then, Debbie and myself and some of our other colleagues in the other offices have been trained to do this training for you. So we're here today to do that. We went through actually with the person that trained it for you the first time. He did the training for us, and we did some practice sessions and things like that. I actually have a master's degree in training and development, so this is something that I did for 3 years before I joined UHY, did corporate training. We'll get to stereotypes later in the presentation. So a much younger version of myself used to teach mostly men that had been in manufacturing for 20 plus years the principles of lean manufacturing. And so you can believe when I walked into a room, mostly men would look at me and think, she is not going to teach us anything about our jobs. So 3 days later at the end of that training, I usually had most of them convinced I knew a lot about lean manufacturing, but we'll get to stereotypes and how that can be dangerous to immediately assume somebody's not qualified to do something. So today's goal is to talk about what's appropriate and what's not appropriate in the workplace. So why do we use this slide? Hockey, what's the best part about a hockey game? The fights. Exactly. When there's a dispute or an argument in hockey, they just start punching each other out. That is not acceptable in our workplace. I know the frustration level is there, but that's not a good way for us to resolve arguments. So we use that slide as kind of, okay, what's appropriate here, what's appropriate in this circumstances, and we'll talk about our professional environments and what's appropriate for work. We'll go through all of these items here. And we're going to start with defining diversity. So your handout, the first section of it is, what are the ways that people can be diverse? So if you could just kind of break into small groups, 5, 3, whatever works for you, as long as you're participating. Chuck and Mark. and write down the ways that people can be diverse. So I'll give you a few minutes to do that, and then we'll come back. Give you one more minute to jot down your ideas. Nope, just the first part.
All right, just number one.
Just number
Can
one.
we put numbers on this next time, Miss Pesky Cheese?
I forgot my audience is accounting. Need numbers.
I was at a meeting. I was at the gym yesterday, and he's talking about eating right, and what is the one thing, how to handle stress. And he looks at everyone around the room and goes, "Okay, that was the dumbest question I could ask because I'm about to get blasted." And he did. Everybody was like, because we've all been there for like 10 years. Yeah. It was so he's like, "Okay, wrong class to ask that too." I mean, he goes, "So why do you work out?" So he come up to me. And I said, I have diversity training. I'm going to ask if that's a good question or not.
Yeah, maybe it's a service we can offer those people. Okay, if I could bring everybody's focus back in. Somebody ask you to get those, Miss? Okay. All right, so go ahead. Let's talk about some of the examples that you came up with. Sterling Heights, feel free to shout out your answers. We won't hear you, but you'll hear each other. So some examples of ways people can be diverse. Go ahead and just throw them at me. Gender, age, religion, race, ethnicity.
Are those the same? We had that
Race,
conversation.
ethnicity and race.
I say the
But
difference.
he brought a good example because they're not. You can be African American and you're not from Africa. Or no,
You're South African, but you're not African
Well, that's
American.
It's a gray area.
I work
But they
in the
are
tax
they are
department. We're great.
they are different. They are identified differently when we're talking about diversity. When it comes to harassment, you can be harassed for one or the other. So they are different. Other examples.
Political beliefs.
Political beliefs.
Educational background,
Educational background.
sexual preference.
Sexual preference.
Marital status.
Marital status. Nice. Okay, great job, everybody. So I'm going to throw up some more other ways. So obviously, we can quickly think of appearance-wise how people are diverse. But we don't always think of everything and what makes working with 200 other people actually pretty exciting and fun. Everybody has a different background, and come from different places. They have different histories, and it's nice. It makes us who we are. It makes work not boring. We can all tap into each other about exciting things other people have experienced or part of their life stories.
So can I make a comment? Can you put that back up?
Sure.
So that, those illustrations in the pink, which is hard to read, by the way.
Sorry.
That covers everybody in this room. I bet you everybody in this room's got at least one of those.
I would think so. So we're saying that everything on this list, everybody in this room can absolutely be diversified by. So
Every one of us in this room is diverse. You know, she just connected with me. She just told me, Canetta told me what. I said, I don't see any diversity between you and I.
okay.
And of course, forget this black-white stuff, because I've never bought into that.
Okay.
I know it's there, but I've always been colorblind. So we started talking about hairdo, you know?
Her hair.
She beat me up before, she won out.
So we have two participants that are pointing out an obvious diversity between the two of them, one black female, one white male. And the male saying, I'm colorblind, I don't see how we're diverse. And she brought up hairstyle is just one example of how they can be diverse. Obviously, where you grew up may be different. So lots of different ways that we can be diverse. And identifying diversity is not being racist, or identifying diversity is a healthy thing, right? So it's okay to identify those.
An obstacle to a relationship or a team effort. I think we make too much out of it, really and truly, unless it's when you start causing somebody heartburn, then it's a reality. But up until then, you just keep an open mind and extend yourself, be patient and understanding. I'm very short on patience, but I try. But I don't see why team members can't be effective.
Absolutely. It should never be an obstacle for teams working together. Any part of being diverse, it should.
I tried to give this speech 20 years ago in our group training meeting and laughed out of the room.
It's true. It's true. A lot has changed.
Yes, it sure has.
A lot has
I'm
changed.
afraid that pendulum is swinging too far to the other direction.
Always the concern, the pendulum is swinging too far in the other direction, and people, we have to whisper everything we're saying. And the reality is we have everyday conversations, and most of us leave work every day pretty confident we didn't slip up. There is a voice in your head almost always. When you're about to say something that could be slightly offensive, that voice creeps in. Whether you say it out loud or not, it creeps in. If that voice is in your head, don't say it out loud at work, period. If you think it could be offensive, it's because it probably is. things that come out as offensive are not always intentional, right? I mean, we have plenty of people, I go to them and I'm like, hey, somebody had an issue with something you said, and they, oh my gosh, I had no idea that was offensive. And, and I mean, it takes them off guard. So that happens. And that doesn't mean, you're being terminated because that happened. You need to be mindful of it, though. We know it's not always intentional. And sometimes that's why we're swinging a little too far, because, we do have somebody offended by something that maybe nobody else in the room is offended by. And so we just need to address it. Doesn't mean something extreme happens as a result. We just need to be aware of it. Okay, that person has a sensitivity to this. I work with them. I'm going to be sensitive to it. And we move forward. Good discussion. Okay, so about your experiences. So, since you've entered the workforce, that's a nice segue. What kind of differences have you seen? Even just, some of us are pretty new to UHY. Jessica started on Monday. Misha started today. So you might not have noticed vast differences your first day or week, but some of our newer folks, what changes have you noticed since you started work for UHY? Just in general about our culture, the way things are handled. It's Friday. I have one person wearing a tie, which is not unusual for Fridays, right? But Monday through Thursday, not long ago, everybody had one on, right? So I'm not sure you're supportive of that change. Oh, that's fine. All right. All right. So that's one of the changes. Any other changes anybody can think about? The dog, perfect example. Annie joined our team last week, our foster dog. So that she's what's that? She's very diverse. She's very diverse. Yeah, she's definitely. So that was a huge change for us culturally, right? I mean, I was surprised when we got that approved, but it's coming around to a way of thinking, and it's identifying that people are under a lot of stress at work, and we're identifying that through our wellness programs and our biometric screenings, and so thinking about ways to make people more effective at work. That's an example of it. She's pretty non-distracting when she's napping all day, so it's been nice, but it's calming when she's sleeping next to you, so that's a nice thing. Other things that have changed, technology, obviously. I mean, depending on when you started, things look crazily different or not so different. People that took the exam used to be written, right? They had to walk uphill both ways to get there, and now, they can take it on the computer. So lots of things changes, and depending on your experience, that looks different for everybody. So understanding the law. We're going to go through a brief kind of history of some major things that came into play that help employers address diversity and sensitivity. You do have some years on your worksheet that you're welcome to fill in as we go. So in 1964, the Civil Rights Act passed. Soon after that, the affirmative action legislation was enacted to ensure that employers made efforts to hire, promote, and retain women and minorities. So not a very diverse group signing that into law, but signed in 1964. The EEOC opened its doors for business in 1965. That's the Equal Employment Opportunity Commission. Prohibited discrimination on the basis of race, color, religion, sex, national origin, age, disability, or veteran status. Okay, we had a lot of people returning from war. Depending on your political beliefs, they may not have wanted to employ you. There are 88,000 EEOC complaints every year. So that's probably when we start thinking things are getting out of hand. But they happen, and they're real. And we have to address concerns, and we have to do education like this, because if we don't, and we have misunderstandings in the workplace, we can have an EEOC filed a complaint filed against us, which we have. And we usually come out ahead on those, right? But it's the resources and it's the time and it's the money that we commit to coming ahead of those things. So that's why we do this education, to try to avoid it from the beginning. 1978, the Pregnancy Discrimination Act. So some of you might not think that that's very recent, but that's pretty recent, 1978. And up until then, you could be fired for being pregnant. So thankfully, that's no longer the case. But they had to sign that into law. Crazy. 19, I think this one is not on your handout, but if you wanted to add it in. The Americans with Disability Act was enabled in 1989. Again, not too long ago. This requires employers to make reasonable accommodations in employing people with job-related limitations or disabilities. This is becoming a hotter and hotter topic as folks with learning disabilities, different mental impairments, mental health disease, things like that. This is becoming hard to manage. It used to be, we can accommodate a physical disability, no problem. Some of these things coming in take a little bit more learning on everybody's parts, and so it's becoming more and more prevalent. And some things are protected by the Americans with Disabilities Act, and some things aren't. So we're all going through that learning process. Again, okay, so what? Why are we doing this? Again, if we don't do anything at all, and we start getting EEOC complaints, and we start getting harassment complaints, and I'm doing 5 investigations in a month, people can easily say, well, I wasn't made aware of any of this. I didn't know it was inappropriate. And so, yes, it seems like common sense to all of you, I'm sure, in this room, like, I can't believe, I'm a professional, I know this. And I give all of you the benefit of the doubt that you do. If not all of you, I know that you do all know this. But it's important for us to take this step to document, to sign that you do know this, and that you're going to be responsible while you're at work and professional. So the next topic is recognizing stereotypes. So if you could break into your groups briefly again, take a look at this picture. And what do you think of this woman? What are your first thoughts as you look at her? So take a few minutes. Take a few minutes and jot down some ideas. That'll be on your worksheet under stereotypes. Okay. So, do we think we have this woman's life story figured out? Couple scenarios, right? Multiple. So, what are some of the stereotypes you came up with, or what are your initial thoughts looking at this picture?
She likes wine.
She likes wine. She looks like a Stepford wife. Yes. You hate her. Oh, you hate the picture. I was like, whoa, that's strong. Yeah, you hate the picture, okay? Love the curlers.
All women wash dishes.
All women wash dishes, right.
Drink wine while they're
And drink wine while they're doing it. What else? What are some of the any men in the room? What any?
Time constraints, because she's like washing dishes and getting ready to go to work.
She must have a lot of time constraints.
Yeah,
She's
like-
got her hair in curler. She's doing dishes. Maybe she's getting got her makeup on. Maybe she's getting ready to go to
I
work.
just find it odd, a young person washing dishes actually in a sink.
Oh, she's doing dishes in the sink.
Yeah.
Yeah, maybe she doesn't have. I do that. Anything else? I get some people say she has a bug problem because of she has like 3 fly swatters. So she must have an insect issue in her house, right? So lots of scenarios, right? We can look at this and think lots of things. Maybe we don't think this is a woman. She has 2 jobs. She's in between both of them now. One requires casual dress. One requires her to look a little bit more upscale. The wine's from last night. She fell asleep on the couch and brought it in and put it in the kitchen. So it could be lots of things going on, but we have to be careful. You always finish your wine. I mean, maybe, put it in the fridge at a minimum. So again, things that we can come up with. So we're going to go through some scenarios, and these are actual people. And you don't have to jot down specifically who you think it is on your worksheet, but give some general ideas of the people when you're reading through these. So this person was a good student for quite some time, but grades began to slip in high school, had dreams of becoming an artist, and at age of 18 moved away from home to be closer to a major art school. They worked odd jobs and were even homeless while trying to get into school. So some initial reactions to traits you think this person may possess. And you can just jot those down. Person B, they refused to do schoolwork in junior high and high school. They were involved with building projects through Habitat for Humanity, and they dropped out of Harvard. So traits or characteristics you think somebody like that might possess. Person C, born to a large, wealthy family. Father was very strict. As a student, this person was outstanding. Maybe you're thinking entitled or things like that. Things that come into your mind when you're reading through these. And person D, grew up very poor and lived with their grandmother on a farm. Later lived with mother, but was rebellious and got into a lot of trouble, and was a parent at the age of 14. Okay, so who do we think these people are? Person A, any guesses? Hitler? Any other guesses? You didn't even take this one before, did you? Oh, you did. Oh, spoiler alert.
Besides trying to get into school, did he eventually get in?
No.
I don't know.
That would be an important
You don't think he did? I'm not sure.
He didn't.
Somebody, after this, Google that.
I get into school, and I say,
Well, he did achieve some things, but yeah.
I heard he was a good painter too.
Good painter. I did not know that. Person B. So, pretty successful, right? Refuse to do the work. We see this a lot with really young kids, and they don't do their work in kindergarten, everybody's freaking out, but they're just maybe a little bit brighter than the rest of the kids, and they find that really boring. That can happen sometimes, right? It's not because they're lazy. It's because they already know all of that, and they're like, I'm not doing this. I already know all of that. Person C. So, outstanding student. Probably not the first thing that comes to mind when you... Does everybody know who this is? Osama bin Laden. Yeah. So, things that don't pop into mind when we see his face, right? And so, who's person D? Is it President Obama or Oprah Winfrey? It's Oprah. So, and I don't know if the child was stillborn or what, but she does not have the child. Everybody does ask me that inevitably, and I'd have to Google that as well. So, why is it dangerous that we come up with assumptions about people just by reading a statement about them or seeing them and making a judgment? Like, why is that dangerous? You make wrong assumptions. And if we're making a hiring decision and we're making a wrong assumption about somebody, that becomes really dangerous. We could be losing out on an amazing candidate because as soon as they walk through the door, something popped into our head and we're sticking with it. That becomes really dangerous. People that work for us currently, if you're assuming something about a situation, about a comment made, about, I think so-and-so is in a relationship, if you're making these assumptions just on everyday interactions and you're telling people and you're making decisions about whether to put them on a job or send them to training, that becomes very dangerous for our professional work environment. So that's why we need to be mindful of it because we're all a little bit guilty of it, right? We've all maybe been at the store, somebody walks in and we immediately make an assumption about that person, right, wrong, or indifferent. There is this intrinsic thing that we all have when we think somebody might be a danger to us. That can serve us well. It could be a totally false assumption. It's not that it's, oh man, that shouldn't have come into my head, I'm a horrible person. It's, if I made an assumption and acted on it, that's when it becomes the problem, okay? Assumptions can sometimes serve you, and you can be correct, right? Our life experiences, that may be what we know about certain appearances. So that's kind of what formulates these assumptions. They can be correct, right? But when you start making decisions, hiring decisions, job decisions, promotion decisions, things like that based on these assumptions, it becomes really dangerous in the workplace.
That's a very sensitive, you see this coat and tie?
I see that coat and
It's
tie.
not because I don't like casual, it's because I'm always concerned about my appearance for first impressions. I
Perfect.
think people, we're in the service business, we're professional, and people judge us. Before you even get a word out of your mouth, they judge you on your appearance. And I gotta tell you this story, folks, because I'm always on everybody's ass about shoe shines. And there's a story behind it, and some of you probably heard it. And he doesn't mind me telling the story. Kurt Siebenauer was one of my favorite guys. He used to be here, he's with another firm now. He tells the story how he's a great bowler. He's bowled 3 or 4 or 5 300 games. And he made friends with one of his bowling partners. And the friend said to him, he says, my father's thinking of changing CPA firms. He says, you want to meet him? He says, oh, yes, I want to meet him. So he finally gets the appointment, tells the story, and says he's getting in his car. The kids had left some toys out on the grass, and walked into the grass, and picked up all the toys, put them on the porch. They got in his car and went to the meeting. Well, that grass and what do screwed up his shoe shine. Shoes were not day number one. So he had what he thought was a very good meeting. He expected that he won the car. 2 weeks went by, and he finally asked his buddy, he said, "Hey, did your dad ever make a decision?" He says, "Yeah." He says, "He hired another firm." Chris said, "Why? Why did he do that? Why didn't he give me a chance?" He said, "Well, he made a remark to me. He says, if he can't shine his shoes, he sure as hell can't keep." That's how quickly you can turn a positive into a negative. When your appearance is not up to par.
And it's a perfect
I gotta compliment the women in this store. They always dress very presentable, even if it's casual. But the guys, I'm not real proud of the way a lot of guys look at this. I think casual gets to another degree. And,
all right, because Sterling Heights can't hear you,
you won't even know it.
I'm going to try to recap this story. But that's an example of them. So Gordon told a story of one of our principals trying to get somebody to switch to our firm. He had to take some toys out of the car, put them in the grass. He walked through the grass, ruined his shoe shine. I'm recapping for Sterling Heights. He went to meet with the person, and they said, well, we want somebody else. If he can't shine his shoes, he can't do our work.
You're telling me that happened in Sterling Heights too?
No, I'm recapping for Sterling Heights. Oh man, but it's dangerous, right? Because they didn't pick the best CPA firm, which is UHY, based on a shoe shine, and so that was a dangerous assumption he made. Like he had a shoe shine, he just had to take.
Said, "I'm sorry, my shoes don't look good. You know, I had to pick up the kid." He should have identified that they didn't look good. You know, and at least might have softened the blow, but you don't have
Sure.
any decision on what he saw.
Right.
What he saw, not what he heard.
So maybe, yeah, if you're walking into a client meeting and you know you spilled coffee on your shirt that day, maybe just acknowledge, hey, I'm really sorry. I normally would not walk into a room with a stain on my shirt. It just happened this morning. Maybe acknowledge it. So people can make assumptions on something as small as that. And so you do need to be aware of your appearance. You could have a client meeting at any second. Gordon can come in and look at your shoes at any second. So you do need to be aware of your appearance. Present yourself proudly, represent the firm. But we need to be careful about making assumptions on people's outwards appearance. It doesn't mean we shouldn't present our best selves, and we just need to be mindful of it. All right, watching your words. So this is impossible to read. But it basically has tons of races on it, and no one is immune, right? It used to be, oh gosh, white men. What are you offended by? You can't possibly be offended by anything. Yes, you can get a copy of that. This applies to everybody, right? White people come from all over. When you're filling out your I-9 identification and you have to self-identify, there's like 4 options for everybody in this room. And we're all very different. So, I would anticipate some changes coming around that form. I would be offended. I can put white, I'm European background. Okay, but somebody coming from the Middle East, maybe not identify as white, but that's their option on the I-9 form. That would be offensive to me, if you can't properly self-identify. So nobody is immune from words that can hurt, damage that can be done by misunderstandings. So, too often people don't realize the hurtfulness of their words, right? So again, this is the unintentional, I had no idea that was offensive. That's so gay. I mean, in the 80s, everybody said, oh, that's gay, right? It doesn't make it right. Just because we used to say something doesn't mean, well, I grew up then, so it's okay for me to say it. No, it's not. It's offensive. Retarded. I have a cousin who's mentally disabled. That word, when people say it, it really grinds me. People wouldn't know that about me, and people have said it in front of me, and I say, don't say that. And yes, because I'm in HR, but if my friends say it outside of work, I'm like, don't say that. It's really offensive. You know, she goes through life with a lot of struggles. People's ignorance to her struggles doesn't need to be an additional one. What are you? When we were in Atlanta being trained to do this training, I was with one of my colleagues, and her name's Stephanie Marino. And we were checking out of the hotel, and I'm checking out with this individual, she's checking out, and I hear the woman say, what's your last name? And she said, Marino. And she's like, well, what is that? And she's like, Italian. And she looked at her and she's like, yeah, but what are you? And I mean, I'm not kidding. We were doing this training and I was like, are we being set up? Is the trainer somewhere here to see how we're going to react? Now this woman, she wasn't being mean. She was truly being inquisitive. She wasn't sure where Stephanie was from. There was a lot of different options based on the assumptions you make looking at her. But it really caught her off guard, and she didn't answer, and she just kind of said, oh, I just need to finish checking out. We sometimes are inquisitive, right? And this wasn't a mean woman doing this to her, but when we don't think about what we're doing, you know, now when we go to that hotel, we wonder, how are you training your staff that they thought that was an acceptable thing to ask one of their guests? Oops. So exotic, you know, we hear people describe people. Some people might describe Stephanie as exotic. She looks different. That might not be offensive. Somebody might take that as a compliment. Somebody might not. Be aware of it. That's so gay. Again, we're past using that to describe something. Fat, right? Obese people discriminated against all the time. We throw around ugly words sometimes in ugly moments. We should not do that. What are you? Yeah, and it doesn't have to be, you know, a white person about a black person. It can be two people within the same race discriminating against each other because you're not black enough. You're too white. It can happen. Lame and retarded again. So when we're encountering these situations at work, in life, we can use the stop technique. So S, talk to your supervisor. State the inappropriate behavior immediately. That's easy for me to tell you. Some of you might not be comfortable doing that. You are welcome to approach me. I promise I handle things like that tactfully with your best interest at mind. I also promise you I take that information with a grain of salt and do an investigation. If somebody comes to me, I don't always, they said it must be true. I have to go into every situation like that because of my job and to be fair to everybody at the firm. But come to me, I want to hear about it, and if I can do something to make your work life more comfortable each day, I'm happy to do that. Tell and explain how you feel. When my friends say retarded, I don't always stop and say, you know what, my cousin is mentally challenged and she has a tough life and she's been through a lot. I don't go through that whole explanation. But if it's something that's happening, tell them why that offends you. Help them understand why that bothers you. Give the offender options. I would prefer you ask, hey, what's your heritage? What's your ethnicity? Not what are you? So give people options. Hey, I don't mind if you want to know more about me, but approach it this way. And provide positive results. I'm glad we had that discussion. This can come from the person that might have made the offensive remark or the person that was offended. Wrap that up with, I'm glad we had this conversation. I really enjoy working with you. I want nothing to change that. Thank you for hearing me out. Thank you for understanding why I said it and didn't realize it was wrong, and move forward. So we're going to do a few case studies. We're just going to do the first 3 for time's sake. At Sterling Heights, you can break up as needed. Maybe we'll do the first 4, actually, now that I say that out loud. So if these 3 rows could work on case study 1, case study 2, case study 3, and case study 4. And kind of read through those and come up with some ideas of how to handle these. One big group, or if that's too challenging, but I'll give you about 5 minutes to read through and come up with some ideas.
That's what I was thinking too. Sorry, I didn't mean to feel that way. Fully eating beef.
Give everybody a couple more minutes. We'll have to edit that part. Okay, let's talk about, do you need more time or is everybody good? Good? All right, let's talk about some of the things we would do in these scenarios. It was like when you were in the Girl Scouts, what did you do to make people be quiet? Like that, that's right. Cub Scouts too?
Well, no, that was like, that's how they do Scouts Honor.
Oh, Scouts Honor. I know. Can't remember. Thank you, everybody. All right, so case study 1. Organization in which most of the employees are vegans for various reasons. At lunch each day, they must all eat in a communal break room since they're not allowed to eat at their desks. 2 employees who are not vegans are the focal point at lunchtime. Their meals are under scrutiny by the rest, and they have to hear endless discussions of why what they're eating is wrong. They like their jobs and perform their duties well, but the ongoing criticism of their dietary preferences is making them miserable. They're considering resigning. They've just asked you for help. So, case study 1. What are some suggestions? How would you respond to this person?
So have they expressed how they feel?
How have they expressed how they feel? Have they used the stop method?
Recommended the stop technique.
Recommended the stop technique. Perfect. Excellent.
Communication.
Communication is key, right? It is. It's true.
It is.
Lots of things can be solved by simply communicating with each other. Any elaboration on using the stop technique, or you just threw that out there?
Oh, that was all we were talking about.
Yeah.
I'll let the rest of our group talk too. Our meat eater leader was the one that we talked to.
What I get in trouble for now?
Nothing yet.
A discussion about why they believe that way, or what their thoughts were, what they had against the person that was non-vegan.
Okay, so the people kind of doing some of the scrutinizing, explaining to that person why maybe eating meat is offensive to them.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, having that discussion.
I'd give them a pep talk and say, what do you let these bozos run out of town for? Because some of those other places that have the same problem.
Give a pep talk.
That's one up right here.
Right, why are you letting this bother you? That's not an incorrect answer. You can say, hey, if somebody's resigning over their lunch being scrutinized, there may be some underlying issues, right? So it's okay to be like, this might be a little bit of an overreaction. That's an okay response. That's a good response. Anything else?
Bring in a big steak.
Bring in a big steak.
We're old school. We're learning.
I mean, everybody can eat what they want, right? And they should be able to do so. I know we have few folks doing the keto diet in this office right now, right? Lots of people doing different diets. We see it in the health and fitness newsletters. Some of you might read some of those and be like, that's crazy. I can't believe that's the amount of work you do to maintain that and whatever. Well, hey, more power to them, right? So it's nice that we do the newsletters. We get to know more about it. So if you want to share, if you don't have to. Okay. Case study number 2. Oops, I flipped my page, but not the slide. Pat McConnell is a paralegal in a top law firm. He's exceptional at his job. He's helpful when asked and always professional in his interactions. Earlier today, while using the restroom, Pat heard several attorneys making fun of another employee who recently went through gender reassignment surgery. Pat was not sure if they realized they were not alone. Nevertheless, the conversation was very upsetting. Pat's son is currently going through the gender reassignment. He's never discussed this aspect of his personal life. What should he do now? Group number 2. What did we come up with? It's a tough one. It is.
Just let them know to be aware that somebody could actually be listening to them.
Right. Say, hey, maybe you didn't know I was in here, but I did overhear you. Be mindful of your conversations. You never know who's going to be around. That's great.
They know the fact that his son is going through the process. I don't know if that's germane. I think they're way out of line talking about anybody that way.
They're out of line. Right, exactly. He doesn't.
I wouldn't get into my family. I'd just say, you're way out of line.
That's perfect. He does not have to say to them this very personal thing that's happening in his life. He doesn't need to explain to them, my son is going through this. That's why I found it offensive. He can simply say, I'm a human being, and I found that offensive. He doesn't need to just, discuss his personal details. Anything else? It is a tough one, right? And sometimes if somebody...
You've got all of these, when you've got a victim, the best thing you can do is become an ally.
When you've got a victim, the best thing you can do is become an ally.
Invite other people to eat lunch with them. Just overcome that silly issue.
It can go a very long way.
All you gotta do is show camaraderie, So rather than try to change two bozos, try to help the victim.
Yeah. So rather than maybe you're not going to change those people's way of thinking. Likely you're not. They might say, oh, okay, I understand. I'm sorry that offended you, but they might go through life thinking what they said was right by them. You might not change them. So align yourself with the victim and develop camaraderie there. That's a good way of handling it as well. Good. Okay, number 3. The development office of a nonprofit museum has 8 employees. Newest addition is a man with a master's degree. The other 7 are not as educated, but each has worked for the museum for 10 years. Although the new hires try to be friendly with coworkers and knows how to do his job, he sticks to himself and doesn't socialize with any of them after hours. He's homosexual and has revealed his orientation to no one at work. When a couple of the single women in the office try to win his attention but are diplomatically rebuffed, they tell their supervisor that the new guy isn't working out. Furthermore, they start suggesting to everyone that he must be gay because he doesn't want to go out with any of them. One of them has just said this to you. What should you do?
What's my title?
Stop trying to get with people at work.
What's my title? Fire those 2 women?
What's your title? Can you fire those 2 women?
That's what I do.
That's what you would do. Honestly, if it's a pattern of behavior and that needs to be revisited, right? I mean, their performance needs to be reviewed. You can't treat people like that, we might not immediately jump to termination, but if this is a pattern with these folks, these might not be people we want to be part of the organization. Any other feedback from group 3? Yes.
I guess I would say to the woman that would come to me first, have you got to know this guy? Do you know that, he's gay, or maybe he's married, maybe he has a girlfriend, or maybe he just isn't that into you?
Right. Have you tried to get to know him outside of flirting with him and trying to go out with you?
Right. And then I would go to the supervisor and be like, listen, maybe if his work is good. You'd be like, hey, he's doing just fine, but we have a situation with these.
But the supervisor says, that's funny, because she just told me you were harassing him.
Right. But multiple people can have multiple versions of events, right? So that's when those investigations come into play.
I guess I would ask what his sexual orientation, one way or another, had to do with his job.
Yes, ask why does it matter what his sexual orientation is? Is he not doing part of the job function? That's my concern, not anything else. Right, and reminding those women of that. Thankfully, that's not a real life scenario for us. So, perfect. All right, any other feedback for case study 3? All right, case study 4. The Right Note was started by a famous, I keep doing that, sorry. Was started by a famous band conductor and has been in business over 100 years. The company has several people with significant tenure. Many have been there 20 years, and in fact, the most tenured person has been there over 50. This month, she received a bonus check for $100 for each year she committed to the organization. Sky Green has worked at the company over 5 years and holds a PhD. She has had several white papers published and helped shape new standards for the field. At age 28, Sky was just moved into a team leadership role. Many on her team have much more seniority. While working down the hall today, Sky overheard people making comments such as, "I've been working here since 1982. The younger generation has no clue how to work with people. They're all so out of touch and glued to their phones. I cannot imagine reporting to someone like that." How should Sky respond? So group number 4.
So I think we were a little thrown off as to why the first part was incorporated into our scenario. I didn't really understand that.
Okay, didn't understand the relevancy of the first.
So I think we kind of just said don't get involved, but at the same time, by not getting involved, does this stop things? So maybe let somebody in upper management know that maybe there's a bit of a generational gap and or that's what they're feeling, so discuss that.
Okay.
And so then maybe there can be a meeting on it to put parameters around, workload and what we can be doing during the day since they think, maybe the younger generation is so out of touch.
Okay. So yeah, let somebody know, hey, these discussions are being had, these perceptions are being made. I'm not necessarily offended, but can we just have a conversation around it at the office so that maybe people can stop throwing things out? Okay. Anything else? Does Sky need to respond?
No.
Can she just kick butt and do her job and prove herself?
I
Right?
think she's doing something right if she had moved into a leadership role.
That's right. Obviously, she's doing something right. So,
Well, that's only part of the conversation. You didn't hear the whole conversation. They aren't specifically talking about her.
that's right. They don't know. She doesn't know that they're talking about her specifically. That's right. So, lots of different ways we can handle these things. We present them all to you to give us a solution. Sometimes the solution is, I would just go on with your day. It sounds like that's not too big of a grievance, and if that's your biggest problem today, that's okay. None of you said in any of the case studies that they should come to HR, so I'm okay with that. I'm okay with you guys handling conflict and uncomfortable things and having appropriate discussions around them. HR doesn't have to be involved every single time. But if it is a scenario, you think, you know what, maybe you should talk to HR about this, that's appropriate too. Okay, good participation. All right, so the 4 cornerstones of diversity, we'll wrap up with this. Knowledge, understanding, acceptance, and behavior. Pretty common sense stuff for everybody in the room. So knowledge, what actions can you take to expand your understanding of different groups? Anything. Get to know somebody. How about traveling? Maybe go. it back on?
Yeah, green lights on.
Green lights on? Your thumbs up? Okay.
She can hear it.
All right. So they missed a half hour, so we're gonna, no, I'm just kidding. They can stay. We'll start with the first cornerstone and we'll wrap up. Sorry about that, the batteries died on the mic. Okay, so the first cornerstone is knowledge. Again, what actions can we take to understand different groups? Get to know them, travel, take a cooking class, all types of things, right? Have a conversation at lunch about the new diet that they're trying, if they want to discuss it. Just be knowledgeable about it. Understanding. If you understand why a person is acting in a particular way, it may be easier to empathize. You know, the person that I go to that is like, oh my gosh, I had no idea that was offensive, and they immediately feel terrible, and I need to apologize, and I'm really sorry. They really are, but they have an understanding now, and they get it. And so have that understanding around these topics. Acceptance. You don't have to agree with everyone, but it's important to respect others' rights to exist, right? This isn't about me telling you what you need to believe. You're gonna believe whatever you'd like to believe, and that's okay in a lot of circumstances. So you don't have to accept and make it part of your life something that you might not agree with in someone else's. But it's important that you respect that. They respect that you don't do it, you should respect that they do. So traps to avoid, making assumptions. We talked about that, how dangerous that can be, especially in business setting. Hiring just to fill affirmative action measures. That's not something that we do. We recruit, we go to campus, we get resumes on Indeed. Nowhere in that process are we trying to find a female with a certain ethnic background. That's not how we fill positions. Failing to follow up after training. We're gonna go through this today. Move forward with the principles that we're discussing. Have discussions if something comes up. It can be lighthearted ones. You can, hey, what did you think of that? Well, I thought, I don't know if lame's such a bad word. Have discussions around the training and take some takeaways with you. And neglecting learning opportunities. So if you see someone and you're like, man, I'd really love to know more about what they just said, but you don't ask them about it. Follow up with them. Hey, you mentioned this at lunch today about where you grew up. Like, tell me more about that. That's really intriguing. That opens a lot of doorways. We are with each other the majority of our lives. It's nice to know some people on a little bit different level. Not as far as dating, but that can happen too. Get to know each other. So with that, what's next? What are you going to start doing? What are you going to stop doing? And what are you going to continue doing? You can have those internal dialogues in your head. Some of you know what? I probably cross the line sometimes. I probably say stuff that I think is pretty funny, and maybe it's not. And maybe I need to be more aware of that. Be aware of that. That's all we're asking. Stop doing those behaviors if you think they're a concern. Start getting to know folks, and continue doing the right thing. I'm going to wrap up that portion just for the recording purposes in Sterling Heights, and then Gordon, go ahead. Thank you, Sterling.